Good afternoon, everyone. Geegado Megwan Kwe here, which means talking feather woman, and I'm also known as Rollie Allaire. And we're back for another Chatting with Wisdom interview series. So today I am here with the beautiful Bernadette Thompson. Oh, there's that feedback. Oh. And so today we're actually going to be talking about her business called Tell Me Our Story. Where I love that. So tell me our story, where she offers ancestral healing and spiritual guidance. We're going to learn more about her work, and you can connect with her on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, or YouTube. And Bernadette is an intuitive spiritual grief coach with over 20 years experience guiding individuals through grief and trauma, with a background in psychology, professional certifications in grief and trauma, and training as an end of death doula. She helps clients heal the past and move forward with clarity. Her expertise is also includes genealogy research, connecting people with their ancestral story. And so today we're going to talk about ancestral healing, deepening spirit connections to move forward. So welcome. How are you?
I'm wonderful and very excited to be here. Very excited to be here. I love our little pre-going live conversation was already wonderful. I didn't want to stop it.
Bernadette's like, "Are we live yet?" And I'm like, "No, let's stop talking and let's get into business." Because I think that this topic, and that's kind of what we were talking about. We started off by talking about my spirit name and like how it came to be and that kind of thing. And so that really connects with that spiritual, or I mean that ancestral healing that that you are so versed in being able to work with others about. So tell me a little bit about, how did you get here?
So it's a story. The way I'd had a deep interest in ancestry and had done that just as a side thing. Lots of trees for not only my family, but other families. So always really interested in the story part, putting names on a tree doesn't, like, really getting in and understanding the stories. But my deep connection with my ancestors, which then opened me up more deeply to other people's ancestors, was my husband was suffering from alcoholism, came to me that he was struggling. And I knew in that moment that life had changed, that we were. And it was during this, he unfortunately passed away 4.5 years after he came and told me. So it was a very tumultuous time, a lot of trauma and grief in my own family, and amazingly, I understood a lot because I just happened to be what I was professionally trained in. So, but how the ancestors came, I have a Catholic background, not a practicing Catholic, but that's my background, all Irish Catholic. And so as I was in this struggle and trying to keep my head above water, I was leaning on going back into my ancestry and just discovering more stories and seeing the stories of my Irish immigrant that came over and the struggles that they had. But and I started using the rosary. It's very tactile. Anybody that has the rosary, and it's any beads. I mean, beads cross over many cultures and religions. So so they're very tactile. So I was using those, and this one night I had a visitation, which for most people might know this, but it is when you have a dream where it is a much more vivid, real, where the spirit of ancestor or that person is with you. And it was my great aunt, Sister Lou, and she was trying to talk to me, and I had my head going in 100 different directions, and I didn't want to look at her. I think even in there, I knew this was really unusual. And she held my hands and made me look right at her. And she said, "We hear your prayers." And I woke up. And I knew in that moment I was no longer alone. And, the interesting thing was when I said the rosary, I imagined my ancestors all around a table saying it with me. I mean, that's how much they meant to me.
Yeah.
In general. So that was my first kind of spiritual experience. But then within, maybe a month or so, I had another experience where I was awake, and it was a channeling. And again, I was using the rosary. I used to use it to try and settle myself down before I'd go to sleep. And one of my Irish grandmothers came in and was channeling the rosary with me in an Irish brogue, which means that I was saying the rosary in an Irish brogue. And I knew, I mean, again, looking around at myself, like, what is going on? But I knew that she was with me, and I was actually able to go look at my ancestry, and energetically I felt that connection, and I knew that it was my great great grandmother on my mother's side. So the energy just came right, right to me, and that really opened up my energetic connection, my ancestors. And when I started working with people on their ancestral trees, their ancestors would surround me, and it had become the beginning. I began to realize that I was taking people through ancestral healing as we were going through it, because the ancestors were having me focus on the part of the tree they that had something that they needed to hear, and that brought some healing. I mean, we all know, or if anybody that has done some ancestry, it goes back very quickly. So the
Yeah.
idea and we are, I feel the collective energy of all of the ancestors. But as we get closer in, which is sometimes where the stories are that we, especially for people that don't have, like you have an indigenous background, like people that don't have storytelling that has come down, through the ages. A lot of it is things that I'm able to uncover. But it's their stories of their journeys, maybe over to,
Mhm.
to America, or, in that type of thing. So that's where it began. And spiritually, I have opened up to, now that I'm able to read people and have them. I just came from the IONS. I was mentioning this to you, the IONS conference, it's the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And it's a very spiritual conference. And I was able to, this was the first time I really was able to sit with a whole group, but I was able to read over 20 people and share with them in this beautifully, highly raised, energetic field, being there. So that's a short story. I could go on, but and I probably will as we keep going, but breath.
Well, and that's really beautiful. And so like when you were talking about like how it just kind of happened, and at one point I ended up with like the hair standing up on
Yes.
the back of my neck and all over my arms, and it was like, oh, okay, this is like, and so for anybody who is listening
Yes.
to this and they're like, this is like, okay, what do you mean? Is that when something is like true in terms of like that, from that spiritual connection, that's one of the things that we often will actually have as our reaction, is that we have like this physical reaction of like, oh my gosh, this is like so true. Or people will talk about like the
Yeah.
shivers going up their spine, right? So like those kinds of things. And so like for me, it's like the hair, like it's right now, I've got like the goosebumps,
Yeah.
of standing up just as we're talking about it, right? So it's just like that whole energy of coming forward, and I love that, and I love being able to hear how people come together. And so like when I was reading your bio, one of the things that that was really interesting in terms of how you've actually pulled all these things together is that you're also a end of life doula. So here we call them death doulas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's what you guys call them in the US, but like for us, that's one of the names for them. And so we had, when my father was passing away, that was one of the things, is that we had an end of life doula come and help support the family as we were going through the process. Like we had a social worker that was there, the doctor was there, we had the nurse practitioner that was there. But having the end of life doula was really helpful because she was able to stay afterwards and just really be able to support the family in that transition. And so it was really great to be able to have that. And I have my spirituality connection. So like for me, it was not to say that my dad's death was easy, but like I had that connection and I had that that piece that was like really beautiful. And so as one of the roles within our family is that I needed to meet up with the doctor, and so that we can talk to the coroner, because Dad was at home when he died. So we had to do some paperwork, some legal paperwork. And so the doctor needed to do her piece. And then I, as a family member, needed to share what it is and share that with the coroner. And so while we were standing outside, that was one of the things that was really so cool, is that my mom and dad had doves, pairs of doves that would come and go every single year. And for a couple of years, they had stopped coming. And doves mate for life. So like when doves come in, they're generally as a pair, or they're just waiting to like start their pair. But when they lose their mate, then they lose their mate, and they don't remate. And so and I knew that, and I don't know why I knew that, but it was just information that we knew from probably from the birds coming around to my mom and dad's forever. And so they had so during that time, when just before I had to speak to the coroner, I happened to turn around, and one single dove, who, like, doves have not been around, one single dove was sitting on the porch of the house. And I turned around and went, oh my gosh, my dad just came in to tell me that he's okay. And it was like that just immediate relief of like, he's okay. He was like, because he was afraid of before dying, and what was going to happen and what was going to go on. And so it was, and him and I had talked a lot about death. And so it was just that like overall peace of like, my dad's okay. And so like those are those reminders coming in from spirit or the universe, or whatever it is that you want to refer to it as, is that those pieces of healing, right? So
well, it is, talking about the end of life doula. We don't have the conversations around death that we should. Other cultures understand, and there is this fear where I feel certainly here in the U.S. that there is those conversations, don't happen, and so it is so when my connecting with spirit, my connecting with the ancestors, and my connecting with the ancestors. I say the ancestors then introduced me to my guide, because I now have a guide that is with me as well, that is with me all the time. And it is when we begin to understand this spiritual connection that we have, and how close it is, and how easy it can be, which is one of the things that I try and do when I work with people, is not only to help them with ancestral healing, but to open them to the spiritual connection that we are all open to. It's more about teaching the language. You talked about, which was a really great, you talked about your indigenous, your native background, and it's a different language. I'm sure that just culturally and speaking, that you were talking about being class and learning things about your culture, and it's kind of that way when we're speaking with spirit. It's a matter of learning how to understand how to have that conversation, and how to open it so then it can grow. It's kind of.
And it really is that importance of being able to have it grow. And like even before learning about my ancestral heritage, because it's not something that we grew up with. We grew up Roman Catholic, so French Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. And so, but like there's a lot of things. And when I actually listen and talk about the different things and the traditions that ancestrally we've done, is that so much of it reminds me of growing up Catholic. There's lots of things that it's like, oh, we did that, but we did it as this. So like the rosary, for example. So just being able to do everything in circle, and like all these different things have been like, oh, I know this. And so like, I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore either. And so but if I do happen to go to church, I still follow those beliefs or whatever. Like if we go to a funeral or a wedding or anything like that, like I still follow the protocols and all the things that we did then. And so, but it's just energetically uplifting to be able to have this understanding of that connection. Like I knew that I could speak to God anywhere, whether I was in the church or not, even though it was always like, you have to go to the church to talk to God. And it's like, but I can talk to God in the field. Right. So, So like, it's just like all these different ways of being able to do things. And I don't have to be on my knees at the end of my bed to pray. I can actually pray as I'm driving if I need to. Right. So like all these different things that I've learned over the years of being able to shift that way of understanding and being able to deepen that connection. And so it's been an absolute wonderful journey. And so for us, being able to talk about death is really important. And so I should say for me. So for me, it's really important to be able to talk about death, because we grew up with like, we don't talk about death. We don't do all these different things because like, that's just not what you do, because then you're going to call in that energy. And it's like, that's not what we're doing. But it's right. Being able to like have that and having those connections with our spirits. Right. So like my mom has my great grandfather comes to her on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. And that is the whole, that they are there. They are there. First of all, our ancestors, and our loved ones that have crossed, energetically, they're closer to us. And, partly it's because of our connection that we have with them. So but even our guides, the conversation just needs to be open and talking every day. And, somebody yesterday, I was doing a talk, and somebody was saying like they didn't really feel like they had a connection, but they always talked to their mother. They would be driving and they'd be, remember when we used to do this? I'm like, that's it. You're doing it. You don't. And it is really learning how they are responding back to us. And they are there. I have been through, and I'm sure many of people that are listening, I've been through, when David passed away, anybody that has addiction in their family or any type of serious illness, it is a really challenging time. And not only were my ancestors there, but then my guide stepped in and able to truly help me make those sometimes little decisions, but sometimes big decisions that I was having to make after having lost, my husband, the breadwinner, my partner, my life partner. There were a lot of things. So it is such a beautiful thing when I can help somebody connect. And that's why I love that you are doing this, that you are having these wisdom talks, and that this is, part of what your way of allowing, like we're raising the energetic consciousness by allowing to talk about it and for people to listen to it.
Absolutely. And being able to have those aha moments, right?
Right.
So many people who listen are very to chatting with wisdom are very like quiet. I get personal messages, but very seldom do I get people that are like on live, because it's like, oh, this is like some taboo topic. And so, which is fine. And I'm very grateful that they listen in the first place. And so, because we managed to be able to get those aha moments. And for me, initially, when I first started being able to connect with my spirituality and understand where it is that was coming from, is that that was just for me initially. So for my own growth, for my own wherever it is that because I'm a lifelong learner, and there's always so much to learn. And so now my grandson is 18 months. And so like for me, it's like, I want him to learn more about our ancestors. I want him to be able to have those connections. And so like my daughter-in-law and I are very much connected to that spiritual connection. And so there are times when it's like, oh, my dad's come to visit him. And so like Brooklyn will actually say, I think Pepper was here. And then she'll describe what the circumstances were, whatever it is that the situation was. And when my grandson's uncle passed away, it was like, my daughter-in-law said, I think he's talking to Cam. And I said, yeah, probably, like, just again, because of the context of whatever it was that was going on. And so, and so we want to be able to continue to build that. We don't want him to lose that ability, because kids have that ability naturally.
Yeah.
And so we want to continue to make it as normal as possible, that he gets to connect with whoever it is that he wants to connect with, and make that as normal in our household as possible. So
It is beautiful. And I think truly being able to open up and honor all of your indigenous roots, all of that brings in, I mean, there's so much that you can, I want to say, share and celebrate with. We don't do it. Like I talk to people about their ancestral trees, but I don't have a lot of what did Irish ancestors do? What were their practices? Because the most I know about them are the ones that came over and know that they were famine families. But to have any of that incredible background that to share, to it gives it gives people, when you can show them, even if it is a not part of yours. Like I don't have any Native or Indigenous, although we're all Indigenous. So I will say I am all Irish. So I've got some Indigenous Irish in me. I've got some Druid or something back there. But it's just so beautiful to realize that, especially our ancestors, I feel that their connection to spirit was so much stronger than ours has been. And I think that's the beauty about taking them back through a culture that honored that, because it gives permission to have that connection now. And yeah, and that's kind of what I don't want to say fighting for, but that's what I'm trying to bring awareness to. There are closed circles that I share all of this in, because it isn't accepted everywhere. Somebody just asked me, they're like, so how many, I come from a big family, Irish family, 8 children. And somebody recently asked me, so do they know all about this? And I'm like, no. They don't.
Yeah, I don't stay quiet anymore. I did. I was like, initially I was like in the closet and I'm like just very quiet. Didn't, and then my mom decided that she wanted to be able to come into the closet with me. And so then mom and I have been learning a lot more and being able to have different connections. But like when we actually think back about with my grandfather used to do all these things that we just thought like he was just a kooky old man who would do like all these weird things. And so then as I've learned more about our heritage and about our family, and it's like, look at that. Look at that. That's what he was doing. That was just crazy. I really wish that I would have paid more attention to some of those teachings, but it was like, he's going to make, and he would actually go into the bush and he would find all these medicines and he would make these medicines and he'd say, here, drink this. And we did, because we knew that he was actually going to make us better. But it was like, these were all medicines that I really wish that we would have learned how to be able to do these things and have that. But he would just go and he'd just know what kind of things to pick. And because he had learned from his mother and like that kind of thing. So it was like, I really wish that we would have learned more. But we'll learn as we go along. And I have other teachers that get to teach me different things. And because of where we are, we get lots of teachings from different types of Indigenous cultures, which is great, because then it gives us that different perspective. And one of the things that I have learned from many of my teachers have been, you take what you need and you leave the rest. And so like if it feels good in your heart to do, then you do it. And so like same as like our tools, like so we have what's referred to as our bundles, and you're not supposed to share your bundles. And it's like, okay, but I need to teach people how to be able to use these things. So how am I going to teach them how to use these things if I'm not allowed to let them touch them? And I just feel like I'm supposed to let them touch my feather or whatever it is that needs to happen. And so then 2 different elders have said to me over the years and so then I stopped questioning it after I had like the first person, and then the next person just kind of came along and just kind of reiterated that, is that if it feels good to you and it is proper for you, then all you do is that when you get something new into your bundle, that you always ask it to be healed and protected from anybody who's going to be using it. And it's like, okay, then that makes sense. And that makes me feel good, because it made me feel a little bit like, I don't know, am I supposed to be doing this? Like, I keep hearing that people are not supposed to touch each other's bundles, and how does that work? And somebody's like, so like you referred to like your husband being an alcoholic. Well, my dad was an alcoholic. And so like I grew up in that environment. And so like, and I've healed from it and I've worked through that. And it's like, but how do I help others? And so, but it's like, I'm supposed to, that is part of who I am. And what I'm supposed to do is teach. And so what I learn, I teach. And so that makes a huge difference.
That is wonderful. I mean, and that is what I am as well, is a teacher. And you made and a really important point about, and I was just talking with somebody from IONS. I was on the IONS podcast, and she was talking about, I was saying how I want to help people, and I do help people to explore, but to explore in the way that you just described it, that you go into it, and when you feel up against that wall, uncomfortableness, like there's something that either you're just at this point, you're still a little afraid of it, you don't know enough, like to come back and allow yourself to just, what you were saying, you don't have to go in, it's take what you like and leave the rest. And over time, like I look back now, I have had read some mystical writings that when I first read them, I didn't quite believe them, but I knew they were. And now I have this understanding of it's just a different frequency and a deeper understanding of this mystical side. But when I first read it, it was like, that's not, yeah. And that's where it's one of the things, and I can feel that in you as well, is this gentleness in working with people so that everybody can feel like they can begin to explore and feel what we feel, like this amazing, incredible, the connection that I have with spirit fills me every day. And so to help people on that journey, to teach them how, and to do it in a way that they don't get scared, because there's a lot of scary woo-woo out there. You know?
There really is. And so like there was different things, like, so we've had some very inappropriate ways of being able to connect with spirit. And so like in the community, like just in the community at large. And so, and that's one of the things, and I'm very vocal. So like, if there's something that is like, yeah, that doesn't sound right to me, just so that you know. So, so for example, there was someone who was actually seeing a spiritual healer, who insisted that they needed to be naked in order for spirit to be able to connect, because the clothes restricted them. And I'm like, run far, far away, because that is not how energy works. And so, so like, if that is how this person is saying that, you need to run and be safe. And so like, it's just really, and it's just really horrible, because then it puts a different energy on, like, on the woo part, right? So like the woo isn't supposed to be inappropriate.
Right.
At any point is it's not supposed to make you feel uncomfortable.
And that's what's making our jobs harder, in the sense that we, wanting to spread this beautiful message, we are coming from a loving standpoint. Mm-hmm. Spirit is love. When you are connecting to spirit, you feel that deep love. And when we come across those stories, I also, one of the women that I read at the IONS conference, and she was talking to me how she had been to a psychic who had said to her that her father had passed. I want to say he had passed 50 years ago, but maybe it wasn't that long, but it was a really, really long time. And she went to see somebody just a few years ago, and they said, oh, he's still in, I'm going to use the word purgatory, because I forget the word that she used. Yep. Had not reached a level of healing, that he was still stuck in this. And my spirit guides, I mean, they were like, no. The moment when you cross over, you are filled and surrounded with love, and you are at the healing point that you are ready for. And then as heal, you raise to a higher, but you are completely, you are forgiven, when you are ready, all of that is just, there's this whole healing system that they've shared. And I might have to wait till I cross before I get it down exactly. But let her know that she did not. I said, no, that's wrong. That he is not. He's not in that state, and that he's in a very loving and so proud of you. And and I sent her an email, and she sent me a really nice email back, just saying how I gave her so much food for thought, and how to think about things now that we had a chance to talk. So.
And it really does like have this so my belief is that, and this kind of goes back to like many times we would actually hear like, so there's no reincarnation is what we were raised with, because like that's like just like
Right.
faux pas, like whatever, that's not supposed to happen. But yet my aunts and my uncles and my great aunts and whoever would actually say, oh, but so and so, like some child or whatever, is such an old soul. And it's like, well, how can you be an old soul if there's no reincarnation? And so my belief is that we are here on this earth to pass whatever it is that we need to do. And so when our story is done here, based on what it is that we're supposed to learn, then we go off and do whatever. And so that we can then come back and relive based on what we've learned and how we actually want to be able to move forward. And like that is something that I have strongly believed, and which is why like I really struggled with like that whole there's no reincarnation, because that was supposed to be our belief system through being Catholic. And it's like, okay, but then why are my grandmothers and whoever's saying that? Like, how does that make sense? Like, how can you have an old soul and when you can't come back? Right. So
there's also, the idea that it's rest in peace. I mean, when anybody that is sick and, in pain, as soon as they cross, they're out of that. I mean, we know this from all of the NDEs, the near-death experiences. I mean, I just surrounded with story after story of people, and they also honor spiritual experiences. So as well as some of them are huge. I mean, what I went through, the channeling out of, suddenly my great grandmother is channeling through me. So, yeah, I forgot what I was saying. So
we were talking about old souls.
Yeah. So the idea that, that there is only this one, it's, this isn't our first rodeo and won't be our last. So
Right.
it's just, and it's all about, it's all about source or universal energy, whatever. We're all a part of it. We are all a part of it. And we're all a drop. If you think about the ocean, and we're all a drop in the ocean, but we're all the ocean. And so it is, we just become different drops. It's kind of like rain that goes up, evaporates, and falls down in someplace new.
Yes.
I mean, that's a way to explain it to a child, kind of. But many adults need that explanation too.
Well, and it all has to do with the things that we've learned, that we've grown up with. Like, so like my dad didn't have the best experience with the church growing up. And so for him, he was like very closed to any type of spirituality. And so when we started, like my mom and I started, and my dad was kind of like a little bit curious and like wanted to know a little bit more. And it's like, what do you mean? And but it's like, yeah, no, I don't want to have anything to do with it, until he was getting closer to death for him. And so then, and he would have these little beings that would come and visit him. And so he called them like these little dark men. And so what ended up happening is, as he got closer and closer to death for him, is that these little men that would be like, he'd call them like les petits bonhommes. So like, which means like the little guys. And so then he would have like these little things that would be running across the room, and he'd be like, it's kind of like creepy, like, because he didn't do any of the spiritual stuff. And as he started getting closer and closer to the end for himself, that was one of the things, is that these little bonhommes got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so then it ended up being one particular woman who would come forward. And so, and she would actually just sit there. She would just sit there and she would just watch him. And he's like, she's sitting there again and she's watching me again. And it's like, okay. So then, and initially it was like, we were talking to him about like, okay, who do you think that it is? And so then as he started getting more and more open, he said, I think it's my mom. and my
Oh,
Aunt Teresa. He said it's both. Like, so he said sometimes it's my Aunt Teresa and sometimes it's my mom. And I said, they're coming over because you're getting ready. Like, you're getting closer and closer and closer, Dad. And so they're coming to help support you as you move across because you're scared. And he said, I'm scared as hell. And I said, I know. We've talked about it. He didn't like to talk about the death, but he did with me. And so then I was like, no, they're coming. They're coming to support you. And like these little bonums, they
yeah,
got bigger and bigger because they got closer and closer as you were getting ready. And so he's like, and then that brought him peace. It was like, okay, I'm not crossing over alone.
exactly. Exactly. And that is the that is the thing that so many people are afraid of, and that is why I got my certification through the University of Vermont. I was living in Vermont at the time, and through their medical college, believe it or not. And it's End of Life Doula because that's what they called it.
Yeah.
We use death doulas used, but the End of Life Doula, and because they were the head of the medical department was very into palliative, and so they had just gotten a chair. Somebody had provided the money for a palliative chair, whatever. um, so that this and that's what the End of Life Doula was under, to help people begin to help people through this process as they know that they are heading towards the end of their life. And it is, that's why it's so important to do the work that we do, to have these conversations, to help people understand that they can start talking to them now. And then also to help anybody that's lost somebody, that they can connect with them.
Yeah.
And then having a guide come in was an amazing experience for me. And if there is anybody out there that has had that happen, for me, they really help me in making decisions, and they've helped me, they've taught me. I've gone through a learning process, and so it is it's just it's a bigger conversation. Maybe when we come, back, it'll be a bigger conversation, but because there's so much more to talk about. And
really
I just think it's a great conversation.
Yeah, there really is. Like, there's just really so much to talk about how you can actually bring that energy and that support into your world. So like growing up, my grandmothers were part of my support. They were part of my support system. Like I said, we grew up in an alcoholic home. So there was lots. And so like my dad's mom in particular, like I spent a lot of time with my mom's and with my dad's mom. And so like she was my safe person until we moved away. And so like I had that connection and I had that support with her. And so like I could go over to her place at any time for whatever reason. And so, which is really great that it allowed me to be able to have that connection. And so it was many, many years after she passed, but like even as an older adult, like she was still my connection. And so as she's passed, she is one of the people that I will call in and say, okay, I really need your help right now. Like I really need you to be able to help support me in whatever it is that's going on. And so and then I've had some other family members as well that have passed that I have a strong connection with. But like that particular grandmother is somebody who I call on a regular basis because it's like I really need your help. Right. So like I just really need to have that listening ear, because when something would be going wrong or something would be going awry, I would give her a call as an adult. And then for a short time as an adult, I actually got to live with her because I moved to her community. And so it was like, okay, in between, before we actually get into before I find a place, like I was able to live with her. And she had a rule, which was really very honoring to me, is that she had a rule that her husband, because she was remarried because my grandfather had passed as well. And so, but she had a rule that there was like no children or grandchildren comes to live with us, because like, this is our home. This is, but I was honored that I actually got to go and live with her for a short time. And so, but it was that connection that we've had all my life. So, so now still, in all of my life, I still have that connection with that grandmother.
Well, and the thing is that people don't they don't realize sometimes the connection that they have with someone that has passed, and in finding their story, they sometimes realize they may have heard something but didn't make that real connection. And our world is so on our iPhones and doing that. And when I help somebody look back, the example, someone who was a nurse, and everybody else in her field nobody else was in the medical field, and she didn't mind it, but she couldn't figure out why she had this desire to be in medicine. And we discovered that her great great grandfather was a field doctor in the Civil War.
Okay.
And it's like discovering. I talk about often, I've done a lot of genealogy, helped people. Canada has wonderful records, and helping people discover that they were one of the king's daughters, that they're a descendant of the king's daughters. And so being brave enough to come in the early 1600s as a bride in order to, because that's what the king had asked them to do, and gave them a dowry so that they could marry. And it's like, I always tell people when I would find that in somebody that had Canadian roots, that it's kind of like coming on the Mayflower. It's like those real deep, this is where we started. And you have that beautiful marriage of, it sounds like, having the French, which they did come. I mean, we it's the conversation, exploration. We won't go there right now, but that is definitely something that many of my clients struggle with when they discover what their roots are. But you are blessed with both, that you have, the ability to share other land as part of that.
Yes.
And through, the ancestry coming through on your French side. That
yes, definitely. So one of the things that before we head out, like, I can't believe how quickly this conversation has gone, because it seems like we just started. But so, like, how do people, like, so if somebody were like interested in being able to work with you and wanting to learn more, how do they, like, so where do they start?
The best thing to do is to go to my website, which is tellmeourstory.com. I think do you have the
Yeah. It's in the description, wherever it is that they're listening to.
It is, and it's tell me our story from the point of view of the child asking the parent to tell me our story. And
Okay.
yeah, so that's where it is. So if they go to Tell Me Our Story, they can sign up. I do have a free 30-minute session if they just have questions, or I have healing sessions available that they can sign up for. A lot of information there. And but again, if they have any questions, they can contact me. But that's really the best source.
Okay.
Is going to the website, because it has the most information there, and they can connect for a session, or and I do anything from healing sessions to helping people do their whole ancestry, because I am a genealogist, so I help them uncover all of their and I am also, as I said earlier, trained in grief and trauma. So when people go through ancestry, sometimes that comes up, and I just want to know that I know how to hold that space for whenever something like that comes up. So.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love that, because one of the things in terms of our teachings that we've learned is that when we heal ourselves, we're healing 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. And so, and I love the fact that you actually hold space as they're going through. So as I'm healing, my objective is to be able to help heal 7 generations forward for my grandchildren, my great grandchildren, and so on and so forth, but also to be able to hold space for past generations, like my mom, and then my grandparents, and so on. So I love that. I love that, being able to do that. And this has been a beautiful conversation, and I'm sure that there is so much more, and I would love for you to be able to jump on another time
Love
to come and share on a different area of because there's just so many rabbit holes that we can actually go down in this particular path.
We have a very feel that I think there's a lot of co-teaching that we can do that
Yes, sure.
share, and I feel like we want to share and teach the same things, and there's a way to so I would love to come back, and so grateful that you invited me in the first place. So.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. And we will be back on again next week for another Chatting with Wisdom and interview series. And I will be back next Wednesday with another guest. And in the meantime, thanks again, Bernadette, for being here and being part of this journey today.